a lot. And I'm just thrilled to have actually four people with us today who are going to look at the different options. Okay, we have Ken Hendricks from Homestead, and Edgar Ortiz from Montecito, where I'm parked right now. Rachel is also from Montecito, and Luke is from Vista Living Care. It's all yours, you guys.
Awesome.
I'm going to exit. Can you exit me?
Well, don't go away.
Thank you, Yuta.
Oh, you want me to stay? No, I won't go totally away. I'll just, I'll stick around.
So thank you, Yuta, for that introduction. Um, the way we're gonna be doing this, everybody, is we're going to be kind of we decided to go at this from kind of a Q&A type direction. I'm going to be asking some questions, and that will prompt discussion between myself, Luke, Rachel, and Edgar. And then, of course, we're going to try and have time as well for everyone to toss us questions. So speaking of that, I guess if you have questions that you think of throughout our chat, you can put them into the chat box. That's been working pretty well throughout the conference. And what was the other thing? Oh yeah, another thing we'd love for you to put in the chat box is where you're joining us from. Because most all of us, we're coming to you, like my organization provides home care in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and the surrounding areas. Home Instead is actually worldwide. We're independently owned franchises, but where I work is here in Santa Fe. And Edgar and Rachel are in Santa Fe as well. Luke represents communities in Santa Fe as well as a community in Las Cruces, New Mexico. But we'd love to hear where you guys are joining us from. And so all of us, as we kind of get to each member on this panel, are going to have the opportunity to introduce you a bit to who we are and what we do. We're not just talking about communities and homes for assisted living, independent living, and memory care. We actually have the component of home care as well. And hopefully we can paint a good picture for you all for how all of those types of services and entities work together in tandem. And so first off, my name's Ken. I'm with Home Instead. And I've been with Home Instead here in Santa Fe for coming up on 10 years now. And we provide what would technically be considered non-medical home care. We can help with specialized services for people living with dementia at pretty much any stage. We provide help with the basics of meal preparation, running errands, grocery shopping, all the way into more substantial care involving bathing assistant, personal care, bathing assistance, dressing, care for incontinence. And we can provide assistance as little as, and most of this stuff, no matter where you're joining us from, most of this stuff is like, as far as services that are provided, will apply most likely to services in your area, as far as the types of things. We are able to come in from even just a few hours, a couple times a week, all the way up to 24-hour care. And so the whole gamut. Home care of this sort is definitely where most people start their journey when they start to need extra help. And some folks are able we're able to help them stay at home, all the way through the end of their life. So, so that's kind of me and my elevator speech. But Rachel, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, the Montecito community, and describe the basics of what would be classified as independent living options?
Sure.
So my name is Rachel Heeman. I'm the Community Relations Director over at the Montecito Santa Fe. Been here for about 5 years. Started my journey in senior care back when I was 28. I mean, not when I was 28, 28 years ago when I was 22. And have been working in this industry ever since. And like I said, the last 5 years have been here at the Montecito. Um, as Ken mentioned, usually people do start with home health care in their homes. And sometimes that will work exactly through the end of life. And sometimes people do choose to come into a community. And sometimes people start off in independent living. And independent living is pretty much the way it sounds. It's you are still independent in your home, in your apartment. We If you're in a community like ours, you'll have services like housekeeping and transportation, and meals will be provided. But care services are generally not included in independent living. Those are things like Home Instead can come to our community and service somebody in their independent living apartment, or even in our assisted living or memory care. But independent living is usually where people start off, especially if they've planned ahead and have planned to come into a senior community, plan to do the downsizing. Sometimes people will move into independent living soon after retirement because they might want to travel and they might not want to have the upkeep of a large property and home. So that's the reason somebody might come into independent living. Or they might come into independent living because their day-to-day activities like cleaning and cooking and driving themselves place to place are taking a little bit more time than they used to, and is taking a little bit more out of their day. So coming into a community like this, you can spend time doing the things that you want to do instead of the cooking and the cleaning and the driving yourself around. So it can be a benefit in that way. So that's kind of where independent living starts off.
Awesome. So, and as I said before, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of take you through the different types of services. And so now I'll ask our friend Edgar if he could, Edgar, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and then give us your elevator speech for helping us to understand the category of service that we would refer to as assisted living?
Sure. Thanks, Ken. So my name's Edgar. I've been at the Montecito now, like Rachel, for about 5 years. My background was in restaurants and hospitality for about 15 years, and I've been in the senior industry now for almost 20. And I had the opportunity to also own and operate a small residential community of my own, which was an experience in itself. And so the thing about assisted living is they come in all shapes and sizes. And so every community has its own niche, it has its own personality, it's got its own specialty, the kind of services that they offer and how they go about it. I've been able to see a lot of models and a lot of different approaches to assisted living, which has been a huge benefit to me as a professional. But basically, assisted living is an option for adults who either cannot or choose not to live independently. And so those are very key differences, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But ultimately, that's the thing. You realize you can no longer, or you choose to no longer live at home or in independent living on your own. And so some of the basic services in assisted living are assistance with basic medical needs, which is very different than your institutional nursing homes or long-term care type homes. These are very basic medical services, like assisting with medications or helping with coordinating doctor's appointments and or communicating with doctors to begin with to kind of be able to navigate through the whole medical process. That's becoming more and more complicated for all of our seniors nowadays. And COVID hasn't helped. And so having the benefit of a nurse to kind of help coordinate some of those medical processes is really important nowadays. You also have round-the-clock supervision for emergencies. There's always caregivers around to basically ask for assistance when you need it. which is different than home care services, which is more of a one-on-one type service. So our service is as needed. You know, residents get to, whether it's using a pendant or some other sort of device, alert caregivers and let them know when they need the assistance. And or we schedule some of those services, which is kind of like what we call assistance with ADLs, which is activities of daily living, like you mentioned before, the bathing, the dressing, the incontinence care, you know, the even meals, transportation, maintenance services, housekeeping services. Those are all the little things that we go in and provide. And then one of the other key services that assisted living provides is the social engagement atmosphere, the different types of activities that happen throughout the day. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be arts and crafts and or those things that keep us busy throughout the day. These are activities to engage and to stimulate the individual to really promote their independence, to help them basically still lead a purpose-driven life, you know, something that they still feel like they're in control. And so this type of service isn't meant to take residents' independence away, but rather give it back. And so we kind of step in and help where we're needed, to allow them to still do as much as they can for themselves, knowing that they've got the safety net of the staff to be able to come in and kind of fill those gaps.
That's great, Edgar. That was some really good information. And then last but not least, on this portion of the conversation, we would ask Luke. Hi, Luke. Thanks for hosting today. Can you give us a little bit of information about yourself, Vista Communities, and your go-to elevator speech on the topic of memory care community services?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. If you see me looking off to the right, I apologize. I'm the tech host today, and I'm constantly having to look at the waiting room to see if anyone's trying to get in. So I apologize if that's distracting. But so yeah, I'm Luke Nachtrub. I am the president of Vista Living Care. We have 3 homes in New Mexico, 2 in Santa Fe. One is Sierra Vista. We have 24 elders there, so it's definitely a smaller. Montecito is a larger campus, so our homes are smaller, a little more intimate for us. We also have Vista Hermosa, who is also kind of, I guess Montecito is in between our 2 homes, off Rodeo. And then we have the Arbors down in Las Cruces. So Vista Living started in the late 90s, and I've been exposed to it since then. My father founded it in the mid to late 90s. And in the early 2000s, I got involved and have been very intimately involved for, gosh, just over 15 years now. I like to think that we were memory care before memory care existed. We have, I guess from a philosophical standpoint, I feel memory care and dementia care requires, you know, a very focused specialty. And this is what we do. This is how we do it. And it really is, it's all we do. We used to say dementia is our business, our only business. And so we feel that that's really what's necessary to provide the best care for those living with dementia. And so a little bit about memory care. I don't want to repeat everything that Edgar said, but memory care is assisted living with an emphasis on those with dementia. So everyone, I'm sure, has seen the stories about an elderly person that's confused, that got out and got lost and you know, was out on the road or whatever. Memory care prevents that. So we offer all those same services that you would get in an assisted living, whether it's ADLs or basic healthcare, coordination of doctor's appointments, all that type of stuff, helping with medications, all of that type of stuff, but it's in a secure environment so that you know your loved one's safe, and from a perspective of getting out and eloping and wandering around scared and confused. So that's memory care in a nutshell. About us a little bit more, I guess from my perspective, it's all about people. You know, we can all have the most beautiful buildings, but we can't be the best without the best. So Vista Living really focuses on our people, whether that is organizing group therapy to deal with the impacts of COVID, or constantly trying to raise wages, or managing with compassion and flexibility and understanding. I really try to start with our people, because we really can't do anything without them. And so that's a big focus of ours. We also have a philosophy where we base our decisions, everything we do is intentional. We're a business second, I say. So all the decisions we make are in the best interest of the elder, their families, or our team. It's not driven on profit, revenue, or anything like that. So just a little bit about us and what we do. We love what we do. We've got some wonderful, wonderful people, and just glad to be here and participate in discussion. So.
I know when I say this, I'm going to sound like super biased, considering the fact that I'm one of the people on this panel, but I really do feel like, with what we have, with regard to these types of services locally, I think that this is a great group, because there's not only, a representation for each service that you may gradually utilize, throughout the journey of aging, but there's a lot of longevity represented with this group. And in addition to that, there's just different colors and different varieties of types of approaches in ways that really, I think that you would find something, if it's a small home environment that's going to be best for your loved one, you have that option within this group. If it's a larger, more vibrant community, that they're going to feel more at home in, you have that in this group. If it's just staying at home as long as they can possibly do that, you have that in this group. But then just knowing Edgar, Rachel, and Luke, you're welcome. You've got a good gift here. with these guys speaking, like I'll humbly say, you're welcome. I know I'm just, I'm so excited that we're the ones that get to talk about this today. But, I mentioned our years of experience in the field, and what we chatted about beforehand as we were talking about having this conversation with you all. We know that a lot of the basics that we just went over might be things that you're already familiar with. And if they are, thank you for sitting through that. We wanted to kind of get into the nitty gritty. We wanted to get into, we have a lot of experience with community members reaching out to us, asking about our services. And we also know that most of the time when someone reaches out to ask questions about these different types of services, you're going to get a similar list of services from these types of entities, and so we really wanted to put some thought and discussion into what are the kinds of questions that people don't ask usually, that would be really, really great questions to ask, in our opinion. In the years that we've spent in this field, it's our day in and day out. The people that we serve, that we're, seeking to help them live as independent as possible and as happy as possible, have the greatest quality of life possible. What are the things, if we were calling on a service for our own loved one, given our experience, what questions would we ask? And so we wanted to get into that. And so let's talk about timing a little bit. Luke, how can folks know when it's the right time to seek help or to learn what's available in their communities?
I think that's a great question. I think we would all agree that most of the time people wait too long. I guess from my perspective and my opinion, after dealing with this for almost 2 decades and working with people that have been doing it longer than me, there's no better time to start than right away. I think that this is such an important decision. We've seen so many people have to make that decision in crisis that it's so preventable. I know it's a very hard thing. It's a very difficult decision. But the last thing you want to be doing is waiting till there's a crisis that you're having to make the decision based on availability. So I would recommend getting involved right away, look at your options right away. And so many, I can speak to our home, so many communities have things you can do. We have monthly support group meetings, we have parties, we have different things. And so I think by getting involved early in the different homes within your communities, you can get a feel for what you would expect when you're actually there. I kind of liken it to hiring somebody. I would love it if I could shadow somebody for 30 days in their old job before I hired them. And that's hiring someone. So when you're going to trust somebody to care for your loved one, what better opportunity to have than to, one, start getting support right away, but really, test drive it. And then by the time you're ready, you can make that educated decision that says, okay, this is where I want to be because it feels right. So I say get involved early. I actually I wanted to read this because I thought it was really good. He's the most amazing guy. He wrote us a thank you letter, and he said, "We, like many families, made some big mistakes deciding initially where to place our loved one. Some poor options were organized as luxurious hotels with movies 3 days a week, a trip into town, private rooms, TVs in the rooms. We were quick to learn they had no idea how to handle memory impaired. After spending a month with my wife, we realized we had made a major mistake." So that to me just speaks to getting involved and really understanding what's out there and see what fits your needs. To what Ken said, there's so many different options. And the best way to really see what's out there is to just start it early. I think it makes the decision a little bit easier if you do that, because the crisis ones they break our hearts when they come to us and so-and-so fell, I can't take care of her, I don't know where to go, do you have a bed? Sorry, we don't. Or it's very hard. So get involved early.
Yeah, I was asked that question the other day. How do you know when it's the right time? How do you know when you need help? And I would say before you need help, you need to start before you feel like you need help.
Yeah.
Like before you're like, oh my gosh, I'm burnt, like before that point, because once you feel like you need help, it's already a bit of a crisis, even if there hasn't been, a fall or something like that. But speaking of crisis, the other day, Edgar, when we were talking about this conversation, you mentioned about how oftentimes, as Luke pointed out, families are reaching out to us in crisis mode. And then you brought something up that I thought was really interesting. You said that, one of the sad parts, of that when we put things off is that families might miss out on some of the full spectrum of benefits and care that's available to them. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, absolutely. Like I said, there's the options for residents is usually either a choice or a have to. And a lot of times, if you're not careful, you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And what I mean is you're trying to put somebody who's probably shouldn't be in a certain service. Let's just take, for example, somebody who's wanting to move into assisted living, but they just started their search, and so they're looking for independent living, not realizing that the services available to them aren't in that specific service, or memory care. It's time to move into a memory care community, and they're looking for assisted living, and so many times it's really, it hurts me to see them miss the opportunity to get the most out of that specific service, and it's because we've waited too long. Especially during these times, I know we've seen a lot of families keep residents at home much longer than they should or could have. And it's become stressful for both the caregiver, which could be a family member, and the resident themselves. It strains relationships. It does all sorts of things. And so not finding the right kind of care at the right time could really just kind of affect the entire experience of the transition. And so just, see it as going into, I'll paint you a picture, for example, going into a buffet and having all of these great items or fabulous food at your at your table, and for you to have diet restrictions, and or not being able to really enjoy everything that's out in front of you for whatever reason.
Edgar,
And
that
so a lot
analogy
of
made
times
us
we're
all
going
so
into
sad. That analogy just made me so sad. I pictured myself at a buffet and I can't eat the food. That's just so sad.
And that's what it feels like for a lot of residents who are in crisis mode, and say, I really would like to get into this community, but they don't have availability. Or I really would like this kind of service, but I can physically no longer have the ability to partake in group fitness classes or pottery class or this or that. And it really kind of just, and so they missed out on opportunity because they've waited too long. And so in crisis mode, that's one of the things is we miss our window of opportunity to really get the most out of our services.
I think this next question is going to kind of get at the heart of why we see some folks waiting. And it's a really important issue. It's an important discussion, and it's a hard one. I'm giving you the hard one, Rachel, and I promise we're not picking on you. We can all weigh in on this. But the other day when we were in our planning session again, you mentioned the unnecessary and harmful stigma that our culture tends to put on aging and the difficulties that we encounter as we age. And that's a factor that prevents a lot of people from reaching out for help or admitting that it's time to get some assistance. Can you talk some more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is this stigma, especially with the generation that we're talking about. So everybody on this panel is old enough probably to have visited a grandparent or maybe even a great grandparent in a skilled nursing community, 20 something years ago. And that's what our clientele remembers. They remember their parents going to the skilled nursing facility, like Utah used that word. They were facilities then, and they were not pleasant places to be. And they were sad, and some of them were a little scary, and that's what they remember. So when this generation, when their children start talking to them about, hey, mom and dad, it might be time to move to, a community, that's what they're thinking. And they don't want that. They're going to avoid that at all costs. And that's because they haven't more than likely been to these newer communities that we have now that are like little mini resorts and very nice fancy hotels. And the services that are being provided there aren't just your basic care needs. You're being provided for socially and cognitively. And so it's not just we're going to take your temperature and take you to the bathroom and let you go. That's not what it is now, but that's what they think. So again, about timing, bringing your parents, that obviously COVID puts a little bit of a chink into this, but bringing your parents out to a community way before they need one. My favorite tours to do are those people that are bringing themselves into my community 5 to 10 years before they are even thinking they're going to need it. Because they can see what's out there. And I always encourage them, if I'm the first spot they've been, I'm like, you know what, go out and go to everywhere. Go everywhere, look at everything. Back before COVID happened, my favorite tours were my lunch tours. I didn't bring people in and take them straight to my assisted living. We had a meal together. We sat down. We talked about what their future was, what they wanted their future to look like. So that's a big part of it. Getting your family members into the communities like this and seeing what they're actually like.
Mm-hmm.
We're not sticking you in the home. That's not where you're going.
You made me think about two things as you were talking about that, Rachel. I mean, and I know our friend Dale Lip with Amber Care is on this call, And I know I'm going to see him start to nod his head in affirmation. Just start now, Dale. Start now. Uh, but I know he's gonna agree with this. When we're talking about stigma, you know, Dale works with home health care and hospice, and there's a huge stigma around hospice that is just completely insane and ironic. I mean, because we all know how this whole thing called life works, and yet, you know, and so people wait till the last minute with a thing like hospice, you know, when they could get months and months of care, months and months of greater comfort and better quality of life with a service like what Dale represents. And it's just, yeah, I know that, you know, for us that exist in this world day in and day out, obviously it's going to be most surprising for us, you know, when people attach a stigma to something, when we know how beautiful it can be. We know how great it can be for a family, you know. But yeah, another one of the things that you mentioned too, Rachel, is you said, you know, you love taking those tours with people that are reaching out 4 or 5 years in advance. And that touches on one of the things that I think you learn that is incredibly important when you start early. Because if you reach out to Rachel 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and you take a tour of the community at the Montecito, and then you reach out to the Montecito again in 4 or 5 years, guess what? You're probably going to talk to Rachel. And that's a huge deal. Like if you called Homestead, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and you talked to Jennifer or me or Chico, and you call today, you're going to talk to Jennifer or me or Chico. And you see where I'm going there is that when you take the step early to learn about what's available for you and your family within the community, as you keep in contact and have touch points with these organizations over the years, you're going to learn a lot about the choices that you know, about how, you know, about things that are going to really help you along in making your choices for you and your loved ones, by having a relationship with people and knowing. I mean, it tells you so much. Like if you have a team that's been together for years, all of the different types of services that they're going to list off as you're calling around to these different types of organizations, the ability to provide those services with great quality hinges upon the team that's doing it. And so learning about that team is super, super important.
That's a really good point, Edgar. And I think we touched a little bit about that earlier, the longevity of your teams. This industry is extremely hard and to stay in as well as long as I have or Edgar has. You don't find a whole lot of people that have spent their entire career in this industry because it's very stressful. You know, we get very attached, and that's how you have to be this type of, get very attached to all of your residents and their family members, and so yeah. But where I was going to go with this is when you have those people that come in years ahead of time, and they can see how the community grows through those years. Like if you have come to the Montecito over that time, yes, you've seen me. But if you've gone to maybe some other communities, you might have seen a series of things going on, and they may make you feel comfortable or uncomfortable during that time. So having a big picture of a community, spending a lot of time is important, especially this is a huge decision. This is, you know, supposedly when you come into a community, it's hopefully your last move and you stay in that community through the end of your life. So it is very important. I have relationships that are, you know, 5 years long. They're not in my community yet, but I know a lot about them. They know a lot about me. If I help them find resources for the things that they need now, they might not be ready to come into my community, but I'm giving them resources like you and Utah and, you know, all these other people. And so that's important too. when you make those connections with these communities, you get a lot of extra help.
It's very good stuff. So Luke, I'm noticing that like we have a lot of participation in the chat box. We might have, you know, answered some of these questions already, but should we dive into that?
I think we probably should. I wanted to comment too. I think we'll probably have a little extra time on this session because we do have a lot of questions. The next session is a video that's 39 minutes long. So I think we'll be able to go about 5 minutes over and still have a little bit of time. So yeah, so we have a fair amount. So this was from Sally. How are new nursing assistants trained at your facilities? How do you create a culture of the facility in the minds of employees? So I can touch on that briefly, and then maybe one of you or you guys can also touch too. For us, when we have new care partners come in, which to me, I've always said they're the heartbeat of the homes. They're the ones that are actually providing the care. So when you're looking at homes, get to know the care partners and get to understand the longevity of the care partners, because they're the ones that truly likely have the highest turnover. And without stability there, I think it's hard to have stability in care. So for us, we train for 2 weeks, and it's a combination of one-on-one hands-on training. It has some videos associated to it. We do something called the virtual dementia tour, which is a really neat thing that teaches the care partner on what it's like to have dementia. So we are a 2-week process before they're on the floor working on their own. It involves tests and all kinds of different stuff. So that's what we do. And I don't know, Montecito, you want to touch on that?
Edgar, you want to take that?
Sure. So our orientation process, like Lou said, is a long process. And so it's just as important for us to get to know the employee as it is for the employee to get to know us. And residents, same thing. Stability for the residents is very, very, very important. And so even from the pre-hiring stage, you know, it's looking for personality cues, you know, because they really are the heartbeat of the community. And so these are individuals who, you know, I hate to say it, but they're not earning high wages. They do it out of passion, out of love. They give so much of themselves. And so it's just as important to see those traits before we put them on the floor to provide the care as it is after the fact. And so, you know, the experience is wonderful, but it's really the person and what that training process looks like, and to make sure that they have all the support that they need, to make sure that they're able to ask questions and really feel comfortable with those residents, to have plenty of information about the people they're caring for, so that they can, when it's time for them to you know, go out and do it on their own, for them to have all the tools necessary to be able to do that.
Yeah, so this question is a great question to ask of each individual provider that you'd reach out to, because the way yeah, some of them are great at this, and some of them are not so great at this. You know, so that's the best way to say it probably. But you know, we have a really great support, given that we're an international organization. We have a lot of training materials that have been ironed out and have been, you know, critically acclaimed, you know, different types of trainings on Alzheimer's and dementia and the aging process in general that we take all of our caregivers through. You mentioned CNAs. We don't require a CNA certification for what we do, although we do have plenty of CNAs that work for us, and retired nurses and things like that. But we're non-medical in the care that we provide. And so, you know, some of it, we do a lot of, like, we have trainings that are about building relationships and really learning how to build trust with the people you're working with in their home, because it's a sensitive type of care that they're receiving from you. trainings emphasizing what it means to take the lead, to empower our caregivers to do the things that they need to do in the home, because they're the ones that are there that know and understand what needs to be done most often. Although we certainly provide support for them at the office level, but and then it may not sound like something that maybe organizations would put in their training, but another one of our core values that's part of our trainings is sharing their heart. Like Edgar said, most of the people that do this kind of work, it's something that they consider to be a calling. And I mean, those are the people you want. Those are the people you want that they really see it as their calling in life to do it. And then following, our initial week of orientation, introducing them to the people that they're going to be working with from the office staff level. We connect them with a lead caregiver that will kind of be their go-to source for information and ongoing training for 90 days. So it's kind of they feel supported, during, their whole first few months. And if they feel like they need more training in the home, we're creative with that. We do a lot of personal care type training where we partner with even the Montecito, up until, COVID complicated everything. But we would actually rent an apartment from the Montecito and have our caregivers go in there and do personal care training with Jerry. Our Jerry is our geriatric mannequin. So we would, we would, we get real creative about whatever we have to do to make the caregivers that work with us feel supported, and just feel like they can do what's necessary for the clients that they work with.
There was one thing I wanted to mention with the new memory care building. We part of our new building, we have purchased a program through the Center for Center for Applied Research in Dementia. And Yuta is very familiar with that. She's gone through that program, and our entire campus is going to work all the way through that program. Training never has ended with us. When you're an employee here, you're always in training. Like Ken mentioned, it's ongoing. And especially with memory care, all of our employees on campus are getting trained, whether they're working with our independent residents, assisted living residents, or memory care, because as we know, dementia can, be there and present in all of those communities.
All right. So I know Ruth raised her hand, Yuta raised her hand. We have a lot of questions.
I was just thinking about that. It's like we've spent like 10 minutes on one question.
Yeah, we need to maybe. Go ahead, Ruth.
Guys, you had to know Yuta and I would not shut up. So, but I actually wanted to throw in a piece on the training piece and a piece on the CNA piece. I think one of the things that we've worked really consciously for, especially in the last few years, is to look at the idea of mentorship, and the idea that a caregiver is not just a caregiver. A caregiver is somebody who could take my job in 5 or 10 years. And I think that's a good thing, that it's a generational thing. We have 2 really beautiful directors at Hermosa who basically are mentors, or they're mentorees. And they give me hope for the future because they're the next generation. And both started out in activities in caregiving, and really bring energy and passion in. So I don't think we can overlook the idea of mentorship.
Yeah, no, that's very true. So Mark, looks like his mother has dementia and he's been taking care of her at home. Luckily with COVID, he's been able to dedicate the time to it, and he has a fear of what's going to happen in the future when he gets back to work. And so he said, from what I've seen, the difference in cost between Medicare and no Medicare is extreme. What other financial aid programs are out there that can benefit our situation? So one of you want to take that, I'm happy to answer it, but I'm reading them. I don't want to take all the questions.
Mark, where are you joining us from?
Rio Rancho.
Okay.
Oh. Actually, I would look into qualifying for the Medicaid waiver for the
Oh.
Medicaid waiver programs through the state. It is a royal pain and it's going to take a long time. Yuta can send you my email if you need somebody to kind of walk you through starting it.
I do. Yes.
Medicaid waiver was how I cared for my brother for many years.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
and there are communities in that area that accept a waiver. I'm not aware of any in Santa Fe.
And then depending upon, you know, the level of help that you need,
Yeah.
Mark, initially, I think it, you know, people are often surprised at how much support, you know, a little bit of home care can
Mhm.
provide. Like, you know, on the, just, you know, on the end of just coming in a couple times a week, a few hours a day, sometimes that's, you know, where people are at, and that's all they really need. And you can be surprised at how cost effective that can be. And I know that there's several organizations out there in Rio Rancho and Albuquerque. Home Instead's definitely been there for a long time, and you could reach out to them, and you know, see what kind of relationship you might be able to establish there.
That's good.
Thank you.
Lisa and Larry, I guess Larry asked, what constitutes a crisis? I think that's broad. It can be anything from someone fell and broke a hip and they need to be in rehab, and when they come back, you physically can't care for them. It can be your own health. I know a lot of, and I think we've all seen this, is that oh, we've got someone that needs to mute maybe. We've all seen that the spouse does everything they can to keep their loved one at home to their own detriment. So it could be your own health. I don't know, Edgar, Rachel, Ken, if you want to add anything to that, I think we could talk a lot about this one.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it. I mean, that's the gamut. You know, you want to be paying attention to your own ability to fulfill, you know, that caregiving role, and, you know, love yourself enough to look into some respite initially, you know, and but the crisis that usually happens is that you know, folks knew that there was probably some help that was needed, but maybe they're out of state or something and they don't really have eyes on the ground, you know, where mom or dad is living, and things are probably worse than they imagined, you know, initially, and mom or dad falls and hurts himself, and or has a medical event, you know, some sort of and then they really need a substantial amount of help at that point, and people call having not known what was even available to them at all, and so they have to make a decision really fast, and that's where some issues can arise.
I think the other thing, just real quick to add, and we can go on to the next one, is that dementia can really plateau or like valley quickly. You could wake up one day to the next and it can be very different. And so in that sense, it can be very unpredictable. So one day you could be okay, and the next day there's a huge wander risk. And that to me is probably among the most scary crisis. If you're not prepared for that, that's just scary.
Yeah, I'm just asking because I tend to, you know, probably a little bit of denial. We'll get through it, and I just keep pushing forward, and then at some point you realize that you've waited too long. So
Yeah,
that's all of us. That's all of us. We all do.
Especially this, it's hard. It's hard. It's a journey that can be very, very difficult. I mean, I know I tend to procrastinate on things that are hard sometimes. So.
And Mark, and to everybody else
And I think
who was participating here, many of us are available to actually help you out and give you advice and listen. Okay, sometimes that's more important than anything else. And one thing I want to say, Ruth and I actually shared one client, and that was an incredible crisis situation.
Major.
Yeah, major. He and his wife, and as it was, she was actually having a psychotic break, and
Mhm.
she'd been the caregiver and he was a lot more advanced in his dementia than anybody knew because he was so articulate. He was a
Yeah.
retired actor, and
Yeah.
so it was a toughie. It was a toughie, and it was. I mean, Ruth was my lifesaver.
Mhm.
I
Oh,
called
and
around, and the situation was such that uh, the other communities would probably have problems with, and the only one who was really capable of handling it was Sierra Vista, and you guys took him in that afternoon.
yeah,
Thank God.
it's a process that literally started with me getting a hang up phone call from the wife at about 3 a.m. and hang up and wouldn't call back and hang up, and then a call from you to what, 7 or
Yeah, we were
in
in
the
the
morning.
ER. We were in the ER over the weekend. I was in the ER with a wife with a psychotic break and a husband with advanced dementia, whose
And then a
every
couple
other
days
sentence
later,
was, "Where am I? Why am I here?"
and that's probably a pretty extreme and scary thing to hear for some family caregivers out there.
Hmm.
But it happens, and it's kind of if there's ever an argument to do what Rachel said and start looking 5 years ahead of time, that particular situation was that argument,
Yeah.
Yes.
because caregivers can die doing care for people.
Mhm.
Part of how I became a family caregiver is my father died caring for my brother. It happens, and it's real.
I want
And
to be
it's not,
really
it,
conscious of time because we have a lot of questions and not much time.
Cool.
Sorry, and I know where you're going with it, and I think it's a great point. Would you tell us about nursing care? My mother is in a memory care unit in a facility in Santa Fe. She has dementia and her health is declining. She is on oxygen, has congestive heart failure. She gets hospice services, so she gets a couple short visits per week with a nurse, but I'm concerned that she may not be getting the attention she needs. Staff members are wondering
Amanda?
whether they do not have medical training. I can't get in to fill in all the blanks. Would you please comment?
I'll take that.
Yep.
Depending on where she is at, I know our communities, we allow private caregivers to come in. If that's a solution, if I know that might not be financially feasible, but most communities will allow for private caregivers. And so if you're concerned that she's not getting enough one-on-one attention, that might be an option. And that, like I said, is something like Home Instead or a home health care agency could help with.
I think that's a great point. I would also add that if she's on hospice, congestive heart failure, I would hope the facility is allowing for you to visit to some extent at that point. I know in our homes, you can come in, and this is a situation kind of like what Rachel said. I'm not sure where she is, but this situation we deal with a lot. And when we have someone on hospice, to us doesn't mean, okay, it's their responsibility. We continue everything that we do despite what hospice is doing. And you should be able to get some communication from the home on what's going on, and certainly should be able to get in and see your mom. So good question.
Yes, end of life visits, they should be allowed.
Yeah. But COVID Linda said, but with COVID, are these personal visits even possible or safe? I don't know if Edgar, if you want to touch on that one, maybe.
Does she mean with home care?
Sure.
Or,
Oh,
sorry.
I'm not sure. Good question.
No, I was referring to the visits that you were saying, visit these facilities so you know what you've got.
Well, it really depends on the facility. I can do in-person tours of the memory care because I have half that's not occupied. And I can do independent living tours. No, you will have to do Zoom tours for your assisted living or your occupied memory cares, those types of things. But there are ways to do it. You can do a Zoom tour instead of an in-person tour. You can have phone conversations with your department heads instead of meeting them in person.
Yeah, I think that there's probably something there that you could learn about an organization by reaching out over the phone and just kind of seeing what time they're willing to take with you. You know, seeing, you know, how capable they are of, you know, because COVID has caused everybody to, you know, be confronted with issues that have made us have to think outside of the box. And so I think creativity is a good thing to have in an organization. So kind of call in and ask them what they're doing during this period, and just kind of, yes, just I think that there's something to be said about even just gauging how long they're willing to stay on the phone with you and just like to talk to you about what you're dealing with. And I think it's also important that I would call my impression would certainly be framed on how much they're willing to focus on what's going on with me. Like, are they going to be asking you, Linda, about your story? What is going on with you? Because that should be the focus.
Yep.
And I'd add just a little to that, is kind of going back to what I've said, is that it's really the people that care for the people. And so you can get to know someone over Zoom, like what we've been doing. We have monthly Living Better Together Zoom calls with our whole leadership. I'm on them. Other families are on them. We've talked about, you know, when we give a tour, try to give a brief tour, but let's sit down. Here's our nurse, talk to the nurse. Here's a care partner, and have a conversation with care partner. So I think that there's a lot that you can do, you know, not being able to go into the home. So let's see here. So Sally asked, do the facilities provide any education that would supplement the care they give in the facility? I know for us, a lot of what we do is obviously we provide the care for the elder, but we bring the whole family as part of our family. So we provide a lot of support for the loved one throughout this journey. You know, I think that that's one of our biggest things that we do. A lot of our staff are more social work and therapy, not business. And so a big part of our focus is, you know, making sure Bob's okay, not just his wife. So that's just a little bit about us. And, you know, we do virtual dementia tour with families and stuff like that. So I don't know, you want to touch on that while I look for the next question, Rachel or Edgar?
Edgar, you want to take that?
Sure. And I think in our what we offer is ongoing in every circumstance. Just like things change at home, things change in our communities. And so our residents, you know, their family members, they're aging in place. And so as these changes are occurring, then we've got to shift gears, and we've got to make sure there's plenty of open communication between staff and family and the resident, and coordinating all of this together, and making sure the entire process is a good process. And like I said, it's just an ongoing thing, and it has to be a group thing, you know, and we have to figure out how to make that work. You know, some families are, communication nowadays is so important, and so some families prefer text messages, some emails, some video chats, some phone calls, and you have to find each one of those means of communication and what works best for everybody. And then we as the community have to be flexible to the needs of the resident and their family and our staff.
There are times, and Edgar knows that we will spend more time in our day with our resident family members, and than we might with some of our residents, because at that point, at that day, they're the ones in crisis, or they're the ones that need the handheld holding. So yeah, we work as a total community. That's why we don't like to use the word facility, because it is a community, and it's extensive.
And I
I
want
think we can maybe do a couple more. And I know, Utah, if there's anyone, whether you're in Santa Fe or not, I know we're always willing. I'm sure Edgar and Rachel as well, and Ken, any questions you have, we're happy to help anyone through the journey and the decision. So a couple more questions, maybe real quick. What training do they have before coming to you? Certificates, CNAs? For us, we don't have all CNAs. I know Ken touched on that. We definitely have some. And then we have certified dementia practitioners. And then I kind of look at our training and ongoing training as its own kind of certification. We call it Vista Academy, but don't have to do caregiving itself. You're surrounded by a lot of people, and our management's active on the floor, so don't have to have a CNA, but we certainly have some.
And that's the same, that's probably the same throughout. I don't believe anybody requires
Correct.
a CNA. It's always nice to have them, but most communities train in-house anyway. Even if somebody comes in as a CNA and has several years experience behind that, we're still going to train them in-house the way we do things.
Yep. And then Stacy asked the Rachel's dog. Is that the Montecito dog? And I wonder if you've used therapeutic trained dogs with your residents to help with depression.
Yes, that is Miss Suki. She is the unofficial mascot. She's my personal dog who comes to work with me every day. Prior to COVID, we did have the therapy dogs coming into the community. We can't do that now. So Suki loves it. That's her job. She loves everybody, and I have fun having her here.
Very similar for us. We had the therapy dogs coming in. Vista Hermosa has a dog. We also have animals that are a big part of all of our homes. We have goats and chickens and cats and turtles and birds and stuff. So we've kind of been able to go without the therapy dogs because of that. But yeah, that's having dogs around is very good. So.
Guys, Susan raised her hand too.
Yep.
I got to remember what I was going to say. But I think what I was going to say, I could be wrong because I got distracted with everybody talking. That having been in positions where I'm taking care of somebody or I'm going into a nursing home and in different areas, I think what I was going to say, it is so very important for staff training. And I can tell when the staff has never not been trained, because all I have to do, and I always ask questions, I'm probably their worst nightmare, but I come in and I ask a lot of questions because I know what questions to ask, number one. And that brought me to Yuta and Ruth and all the people who are on here doing this, is that to bring this to the community, even though people are afraid, and that's what it is, they're absolutely afraid to walk through the front door of any facility and what we're talking about, because they have to deal with their own death. And so, or they have to deal with their own illnesses or their own potential, whatever that looks like. And the more that the facilities can train people outside of the facilities to walk them into the facility and to educate is so vital. And I know there's not enough people to do all this, but somehow there has to be training for those people to be able, people who are people, to go out and do this. Mm-hmm. Because it is absolutely vital to have Yuta. It is absolutely vital to have all of you, have Ruth, to have all of you, and I don't remember everybody's names here, who actually go into the community and make it part of their training to bring the people into the community, out of the community, into their communities on the outside, bring people into the community. And because of COVID, this is such a great way to do this on Zoom because it's non-threatening. Mm-hmm. It's not the same as physically walking in the door of, quote, a nursing home or a retirement home, or whatever words different areas call this at the facilities. It's vital. And not just, I'm a proponent of inviting people in so that residents can have communication with other people. I mean, I'm not talking about just open the door and let people come in and communicate. There has to be a system to, a process so that you don't have problems. But it's really, really important. It's like having dogs or cats or horses or, you know, whoever come in, because they have interaction. The more you have interaction with people who have dementia and other issues, the more vitality you bring to that person's life, no matter how long or no matter how short. And that, I think that's primarily what I wanted to say, but there you go. Thanks.
Thank you. Well said for sure.
Yep.
I'll do.
I'd
Go
like
ahead.
to say something, if possible, about that. I've been doing this for a while, and the reason I'm here at the Montecito is because of their thought process behind helping residents transition into this type of care. We literally were open to the public. So we have a fitness center and a spa, and we had a lounge and a restaurant that the outs community could come in and enjoy. So we had a lot of seniors who didn't live here come in and experience some of what we had to offer. And they began to build those relationships with our current residents, and that kind of softened them up and opened their mind a little bit towards moving in this direction when the time had come. And so that in itself, you know, 5 years for me was what I felt the industry needed to begin to do a long time ago.
That's very cool. Very cool.
2 comments, if you don't mind.
Yep.
First of all, the state legislature that's in session right now, and that's why Amy is not going to be able to be here in person the next session. They are actually going to be considering required dementia care training for staff going into any of the communities around the state. And that's number one. And the other one is later on, I think it's tomorrow, that we're going to be talking about the different philosophies. So we're going to sort of get back to this conversation later. Okay. And why you guys are doing what you're doing.
Perfect. I know the next thing that we're going to be doing is to what Yuta's point said is it's about a 40-minute video from Amy, who has extensive legal experience, and this is all on documents and support choices and decisions. There's one more question I wanted to make sure that Ken was able to answer, because it was direct about home care, and then I think that we covered everything. So how does home care deal with the different living conditions, room in the home, pets, feeding and nutrition, clutter? Do you set up a care room to fit the needs of the visiting nurses?
Well, I mean, we don't really want to, we wouldn't really want to move into anyone's home and require that they modify anything for us to be there, unless of course, you know, it's something that comes up on our initial, you know, safety assessment, you know, of the home. We might recommend that some things be modified for the safety and convenience of our client that we're helping. But your question might be in line with, like, as things progress. I mean, if we're helping someone in their home, providing home care all the way through to, you know, playing a part of the team along with hospice, things like that. Oftentimes at that point, you know, they will, you know, set up an entire room with a hospital bed and all of the supplies and the space needed for everyone to be safe and to be able to make the person as comfortable as possible. But if I'm totally off base and not answering your question well, feel free to, I'll put my email in the chat, and you can email me and say that had nothing to do with my question. This is my actual question.
There you go. Okay, well, Edgar, Ken, thank you for hosting us. Rachel, this was a great conversation. I appreciate it. And Yuta, if you want to share our information and Ruth's information with everybody on email, I think that would be great. And I'll speak for us, we're willing and able to help anyone, local or not. So appreciate the time.
Absolutely.
Everybody.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Yep. Thank you. All right.